Okay, so now that you have all of your tools and maybe some sponge to clean up, I just want you to know where you can find things here in the studio. So hopefully you've entered through the door and you've already secured a locker for yourselves. So maybe you can put your bag or your personal belongings in your locker and leave them in a safe place secured with your lock. And now that you're in the studio, you have your sponge and your tools. The first thing I'm going to do is find an open wheel. And we have many different wheels here. I prefer a kick wheel, and I'll do my demonstration on the kick wheel. So I'm just going to claim that as my spot. Again, you may have bought some Cone 10 clay at Alpha Fired Arts, but if you don't have any clay for yourself, notice there's plenty of recycled clay under the wedging tables. This is actually really good clay, even though it's recycled. It's really good. And one additional thing to think about here on these wedging tables is these X's are not saying to stand here, or it's not saying to work here. It's saying don't work here and don't stand right there. And that way everyone will have plenty of space. There are other areas to wedge clay, some in the hand building room, some in the glazing room, and I will show you those places when you're here, because 19 people aren't going to be able to wedge clay right here at one time. When you need some water, you can either use the small bucket that you've got for yourself. If you didn't get your own bucket, there are some buckets over here. When it's hot outside, I use cold water. When it's cold outside, I use hot water. It's totally up to you what kind of water you want to use. So now, that's where I'm going to make stuff, but before you make anything out of clay, it's always advisable to wedge your clay. When I'm unwrapping this, I usually just turn it inside out to expose however much I'm going to need. And I think a reasonable amount to start with for anybody who's just learning how to wedge would be probably just cutting off half of this bag. If the whole bag's about 25 pounds, then this should be somewhere around 12 pounds. Now we got 10. 10's good. So I got about 10 pounds of clay here. I think that's manageable for just about anyone. And then I'm going to make sure this clay does not dry out while I'm working. So it's pretty simple to just twist it and rest it upside down. And I could take this and go put it back in my locker if I wanted to, or I could just set it back over near my personal items over by my wheel. So wedging is the process of mixing the clay so that it all becomes the same uniform stiffness or softness. Right now there might be hard spots, there might be soft spots. So by wedging, I'm going to make it all the same homogeneous blend, and that way it's going to react to whatever I do with it. I could roll a slab, I could roll coils, I could pinch a pot, or I could throw on the wheel. And if I didn't do this, the wheel would not go well for me. So some ways to wedge, some people are pushing away from themselves, and that makes like this indentation. And then you fold that over and you get like one layer with another layer on top of it. And there's 3 layers now. So I'm stacking layers just by folding this. I've got 4 now. So I get 1 layer for every time I push it. And I'm also going to get a really good workout and eventually probably develop carpal tunnel syndrome, which is something a lot of potters get. So if you want to learn a healthier way to wedge, instead of pushing it and wedging it like that, you can cut it. And here I can just stack. So here I've got 2 layers, 1, 2. And if I push down a little bit, I can do that again. Now you see those 2 layers with these 2 layers. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I got 4 layers and I've just pushed on it twice. And boom. 4 and 4 is 8. You're doubling, but you gotta stack them like pancakes. You can't stack them like books. So keeping everything flat on the table. So those 8 layers become 16. And every time it doubles, so 16 becomes 32. $64. Again, we were talking about habits today, and if you want to build a good habit, then really just ease into this process. So 64 becomes 128 or something. And notice, I'm not just picking it up before I do it again. I'm smashing that down to keep it from piling higher as I stack. Because if you didn't, pretty soon you'd have a really tall, narrow stack. So those 128 becomes 256. $256 becomes, we'll just call it 500. That makes it easy for math. So I got 500 layers in here. If I cut 500 in half, stack it, that's 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000 layers already. 128,000 layers. 256,000 layers. We'll just call that 500,000 layers because I'm sick of the math. 500,000 becomes 1,000,000 that quickly. And I don't have carpal tunnel, and I'm barely breaking a sweat. So, before you take this to your wheel to work, clean the wire off. Get all your little bits of clay, you might want to use those. This has become such a well-blended mass of clay now that it's all pretty much the same consistency. There's no hard spots, there's no soft spots, it's all well-blended. Some tips. When you're putting this down, I usually flip it. Because when I flip it, it's smooth, and then I just set this on there. But notice, it's bumpy on the top because my hands are pushing on there. So I cut it, I flip the first one because that's flat. That's flat. We don't want air bubbles. And you gotta do this in a timely manner. If I really struggle with this and it takes me an hour to wedge, all I'm really doing is drying my clay out. But if I can handle this in like 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, then your clay is going to be fresh. I'm sorry, my technician is doing something.
You got 1 minute left for this video.
Oh, I have 1 minute left for this video. I'm going to have to take another video. Okay. We're going to stop this and we'll relocate to the wheel. Actually, I should have portioned this up. So let's say